be here. I'm very grateful. Thank you all for coming. The opportunity to feel the soil of Palestine, a place that I've always carried in my heart, presented itself in the autumn of 2009 when I went as a member of the Arab Jewish Women's Peace Coalition from Edmonton. I have to say, no amount of reading, and I had done quite a bit before we left, but no amount of reading could have prepared my small town Alberta eyes and ears for what I saw and what I heard. Things that will continue to haunt me, I believe, forever. Our peace coalition covered a lot of territory, observing and meeting with Jewish and Israeli peacemakers, heroes that Western media rarely report about, heroes like Ronnie Perlman, an Israeli grandmother, and others like her that belong to that group, that will volunteer their time at checkpoints to advocate for Palestinians and to document soldier abuses. Heroes like Salim, a Palestinian father of 7 whose house was demolished not once, but 6 times and rebuilt. After the 4th demolition, his family was so traumatized that they abandoned the house and moved to another location in the village of Anata where they lived, and converted the house into it's called Beit Arabiya, named after his wife. It's a house for peace. That's where volunteers, both local and international, stay when they're rebuilding homes, when they volunteer to rebuild homes for Palestinians. I witnessed how thousands of Palestinians start and end their day, waiting for hours each day in long lines and cages at a checkpoint, completely at the mercy of pubescent-looking soldiers. I heard stories of Palestinians being prevented from going to work, attending school, visiting family, or getting medical help. Like the father of a 10-year-old boy who had the appropriate Israeli-mandated permit and routinely would take to his son for dialysis 3 times a week. He would take him to the hospital in Jerusalem for dialysis. And one day, for no reason, he was prevented from crossing. He had to find another adult that the soldier would agree could take him across so that his son could have the dialysis that he needed. Israeli soldiers often exploit such dire situations to recruit informants. We'll let you take your son to the hospital in exchange for spying on your neighbor or your family or friends. I witnessed and felt the occupation for myself, the impact of the Israeli-built wall and watchtowers, Jewish-only settlements, and roads built on stolen Palestinian land. One Jewish volunteer with the Israeli Committee Against House Demolitions called Israeli policies and practices in Palestine as, quote, the great act of taking, end of quote. Israel has rendered the biblical land of milk and honey into a series of open-air prisons for Palestinians and reduced its city centers into ghettos and ghost towns. For example, and the most depressing place that I saw was Hebron. That's where the Israeli army closed its main road that cut through the city from north to south. The name of the street is Shuhada Street. It closed it 22 years ago. So what once was the commercial hub of Hebron is now literally a ghost town. Because of all the violence, the curfews, both from, imposed by the army, violence from settlers, the house confiscations, all kinds of horror stories. Thousands of Palestinians left their homes along Shuhada Street. A few brave families that remain live behind barred up windows and are not allowed to use their front door that borders the street because they're not allowed to even step 1 foot on Shuhada Street. So to get to their homes, these people, the few that do remain, have to go, get up some ladder and get to their home through some backyard, either someone else's backyard or their backyard. And although my first journey was an incredible learning experience, I felt more like a voyeur. and it left me wanting more. So I returned the following summer on my own in the autumn of 2010. This time I volunteered to pick olives for Palestinians. Not because there's a labor shortage. Rather, Palestinians are often prevented, harassed, beaten, thrown in jail, their crops burned. And for many people, their fruit trees or their olive groves are their only source of income. I joined about 100 other internationals, essentially acting as human shields, hoping that our presence would deter violence from either Israeli soldiers or armed settlers. I stayed with the local Palestinian family my whole time. We picked olives in a different field every day, so I got to meet a lot of different people in the Bethlehem area. We visited crowded refugee camps, and I also got to participate in sit-ins and in demonstrations. In short, I witnessed an ever-shrinking Palestine being usurped house by house, street by street, and hilltop by hilltop. And that's no exaggeration. I heard countless stories of Israeli aggression and Palestinian suffering and resistance, and recorded them. It was the same story everywhere I went. One story of decades of dispossession, displacement, and oppression. But there were also atypical stories that I heard, like that of Ronnie, a 30-year-old Palestinian man who was shot by the Israeli army when he was demonstrating at the start of the Second Intifada. He was wounded really badly, mistakenly pronounced dead on the radio. He had to have numerous surgeries. Imagine his father hearing that his son's name on the radio. But he pulled through, and he did end up paralyzed. He's in a wheelchair. He eventually got married and even had triplets. I met him when I was demonstrating one Friday in the village of Birain, and he invited me to his home after the protest. I'll never forget him. I know every Friday I think about him, and I know that he'll be there in his wheelchair leading the demonstrators, knowing fully well that he may not return home safe to his little girl and his wife, knowing that he could be shot at again, but he still goes out every Friday. Another atypical story is that of Muhammad from the 500-year-old village of Ain Hawd. It's located in the Carmel Mountains near Haifa in northern Israel. It dates back to Saladin's time. And it's one of a handful of villages that Israel did not destroy after they depopulated it. Shortly after Israel depopulated the village, they moved Jewish immigrants from North Africa into the village. They didn't stay very long. They soon abandoned the homes, the new immigrants, claiming that they were haunted. Meanwhile, Muhammad and about 30 members from his extended family didn't flee like most Palestinians around 1948. They stayed. They left their village and their homes, but they went further up the slope, about a kilometer or two up the slope, on lands that the family owns. And what they did is they hid in caves for the longest time. Eventually they built homes and established a new village. The once upon a time village of Ain Hawd was converted into an artist's colony after the first immigrants abandoned it. And the village mosque, it's now a bar. Muhammad has had to live most of his life with his former home in full view just further down the slope. I'm just amazed that he somehow managed to cope with that constant reminder. And what else was really remarkable about him when he told us his story was when he said, "I just want to live in peace. I'm not trying to claim my old home or my village. I just want to live in peace. I don't care which flag flies over this country." Every Palestinian, indeed, that I encountered was a teacher who showed me how amazing the human spirit can be. My last visit to the Holy Land was in 2011, That year I participated in the Path of Abraham tour. It was the first of its kind interfaith group from Canada comprised of Jews, Muslims, and Christians. We were led by an imam, a rabbi, and 2 Christian ministers. And the purpose was to visit our respective holy places. Now, I have a fascination with stories, the power of words and images to communicate. And I've always dreamed about writing a book, but I didn't actually think that it would come to fruition, or that I would write a book about what has been described as the longest standing refugee crisis in the world. So why the book? I have various reasons that I'd like to share with you. I went, I saw, I heard, and I couldn't forget, nor did I want to, nor could I resume my relatively unfettered life as if nothing happened. I was compelled by a handful of words, a simple line that I saw scrawled on the Israeli-built wall near Bethlehem. And the line said, now that I have seen, I am responsible. Smuggled Stories from the Holy Land was my way of protesting the occupation of Palestine, my way of showing solidarity with the Palestinian people, my way of trying to create greater awareness about their reality. And my book also fulfills a promise that I made to some Palestinians who, when asked, what can I do? When they would tell me their story, and I would ask, what can I do? And they would always say, tell your government about how we live. Put pressure on your government to stop the occupation. This book, in part, also was my way of countering the suppressed Palestinian narrative. Palestine is always in the news, but misinformation abounds. I was beyond tired of throwing my fuzzy slippers at the television screen every time I listened to the news about the so-called conflict, tired of the imbalance, the lack of context, the constant drone of Israeli victimhood and security, and the denial of Palestinian humanity, the biased language, how the turmoil in the region is framed, the inaccurate labeling, dangerous rhetoric disguised as journalism. For example, occupied Palestinian territories are now being referred to as the disputed territories. Rubber bullets are actually rubber-coated steel bullets. And even the term conflict, like so many other words that the media uses, is a weasel word. Terms like the IDF. Israel is reportedly the 4th most powerful army in the world with nuclear capability, a huge manufacturer of weaponry that it tests on Palestinians. It exists to enforce the occupation, and to me, they are more offensive forces. And why doesn't the media just call them Israeli soldiers? That's what they are. And in a way, in doing that, I feel like a modern-day female David taking on Goliath for daring to have the audacity to challenge entrenched attitudes and mindsets that are manufactured by mainstream media. But I'm not deterred. David used a sling, I have my words, and Goliath was beaten. And as it turned out, this book became my therapy, my way of alleviating the feelings of guilt that I experienced when I came back, and the feelings of helplessness and hopelessness. I realized that I might not see peace in my lifetime, perhaps not even in my children's lifetime. Because how can there be peace when one party to that process is being oppressed? But I realized also that there would be no peace for me until I did something with my notes and the thousands of photos that I took. I had to at least try, and hence my book. I have brought copies. I hope that I've piqued your interest enough to buy one. And I'd like to mention that most of the proceeds so far I've been donating to the Daughters for Life Foundation. It's a Canadian registered organization that provides scholarships for girls, for post-secondary, for girls in the Middle East. In closing, I want to say that I will always see myself as a student. I won't rest or come to some end point in my learning, nor will I take a respite from speaking out against injustice, no matter where it occurs. And I challenge anyone to live one day as the Palestinians do. And I say with all humility that peace and protection of human rights is everyone's business. We're all responsible. My book is a small contribution. I was compelled by a handful of words to write over 70,000 words, despite knowing that no amount of words can do the Palestinians justice. Thank you.